Jasmine Crockett was not your average politician. She had a reputation for being bold, unapologetic, and fiercely passionate about the causes she believed in. Whether it was speaking out against inequality or pushing for change in her community, Jasmine always gave 110%. Her speeches were known to electrify crowds, leaving people inspired and ready to take action. But this fiery energy that made her so loved by supporters also made her a target for critics, and one critic, in particular, had been circling her. Like a hawk waiting for the perfect moment to strike, enter Karoline Leavitt, a sharp-tongued conservative commentator who wasn't afraid to go after anyone she disagreed with. Karoline's rise to fame came from her ability to challenge powerful figures head-on. She prided herself on exposing what she called hypocrisy in politics, often using social media as her weapon of choice. For months, she and Jasmine had traded jabs online, each accusing the other of being out of touch or dishonest. Their arguments played out publicly on platforms like Twitter, where followers eagerly picked sides. Supporters of Jasmine accused Karoline of twisting facts, while Karoline's fans dismissed Jasmine as all talk and no substance. The tension between them grew thicker with every passing day, but neither woman expected their feud would boil over. In person, it all came to a head at a community forum focused on education reform. On paper, the event seemed ordinary enough, local leaders gathering to discuss how to improve schools and create better opportunities for students. But everyone knew the real draw wasn't the topic. It was the personalities. Jasmine and Karoline were set to share the stage, and anticipation filled the air. Attendees whispered among themselves, wondering if sparks would fly. Reporters lined up early, cameras ready to capture every move. Even the moderator seemed nervous, glancing between the two women as they took their seats. Jasmine walked in wearing a sleek suit exuding confidence. She greeted a few familiar faces in the audience before settling into her chair. Across from her sat Karoline, calm and collected, flipping through her notes without a hint of nerves. When their eyes met briefly, there was no warmth, just a silent acknowledgement of the battle ahead. As the moderator kicked things off, the room fell silent except for the hum of recording equipment. Jasmine leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. This was her chance to shine, and she wasn't going to waste it. When the floor opened for discussion, Jasmine didn't hesitate. She launched into a passionate speech about systemic inequalities in education. Her voice carried across the room, painting vivid pictures of struggling families and underfunded schools. "We can't keep ignoring these issues," she said, her tone firm yet empathetic. "Every child deserves a fair shot, regardless of where they come from." The crowd responded immediately, applauding loudly. Some attendees even stood up, cheering her on. Jasmine basked in the energy of the room, feeding off the support. This was her element, and she owned it. But just as quickly as the applause began, Karoline stepped in to counter. With a calm demeanor, she presented statistics and examples that challenged Jasmine's narrative. "While I agree that education is important," Karoline said, her voice steady and measured, "we need to focus on solutions that actually work, not just sound good in theory." She pointed out specific instances where policies similar to those Jasmine supported had failed elsewhere. The contrast between the two women couldn't have been starker. Where Jasmine appealed to emotion, Karoline relied on logic. And while Jasmine's words stirred passion, Karoline's approach demanded scrutiny. The debate continued, growing more intense with each exchange. Jasmine pushed back hard against Karoline's criticisms, refusing to let her dominate the conversation. "You're missing the bigger picture here," Jasmine insisted, her volume rising slightly. "These aren't just numbers, they're real lives we're talking about." Karoline nodded politely but remained unmoved. "And I'm saying intentions don't matter if results are lacking," she replied coolly. The tension in the room became palpable. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to clap, gasp, or stay silent. As the moderator tried to steer the conversation back on track, small cracks began showing in Jasmine's composure. Karoline's calm persistence was starting to get under her skin. Each rebuttal felt like a calculated jab designed to unsettle her. And when Karoline brought up past statements Jasmine had made that contradicted her current stance, something inside Jasmine snapped. That's low, even for you, Jasmine shot back, her frustration spilling into her tone. Karoline simply smiled faintly, unfazed by the accusation. It was clear this wasn't just about policy anymore. It was personal. By the time the first half of the forum ended, the atmosphere was electric. Attendees buzzed with excitement, dissecting every moment of the heated exchange. Reporters rushed to file updates, eager to share the drama unfolding before them. Meanwhile, backstage, Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to regain her footing. She scrolled through her phone, only to find mixed reactions pouring in online. Some praised her passion, while others mocked her inability to stay composed. One thing was certain: this confrontation was far from over. Backstage, Jasmine tried to gather herself, but her mind was racing. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. She could feel the eyes of the world watching, judging every word she said, or didn't say. Her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications, each one a reminder of how high the stakes were. Supporters sent messages of encouragement, urging her to stay strong, while critics gleefully pointed out perceived missteps. It was overwhelming, but Jasmine wasn't about to let anyone see her crack. Not here. Not now. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror and straightened her shoulders. "You've got this," she muttered under her breath, trying to channel the same fire that had propelled her into politics in the first place. But doubt lingered in the back of her mind. Had she come across as too defensive, too emotional? These questions swirled around her head like a storm cloud, refusing to settle. Just as she was about to step back out, someone from her team handed her a glass of water. "Take a minute," they urged softly. "You're doing great." Meanwhile, Karoline sat calmly in her seat, reviewing her notes with an almost eerie focus. If she felt any pressure, she didn't show it. Instead, she seemed to thrive in the chaos, feeding off the energy of the room. Every time Jasmine raised her voice or gestured emphatically, Karoline leaned back slightly as if savoring the spectacle. Her strategy was clear: stay composed, stay sharp, and let her opponent unravel. And so far, it appeared to be working when the second half of the forum began. The moderator attempted to steer the conversation toward solutions rather than personal attacks. But the tension between the two women was impossible to ignore. As soon as the moderator posed a question about accountability and leadership, Karoline seized the opportunity. With a measured tone, she turned the spotlight directly onto Jasmine. "I think it's important for leaders to practice what they preach," she said, her words deliberate and cutting. "But sometimes, actions speak louder than words." Pew. Room fell silent. All eyes shifted to Jasmine, waiting for her response. For a split second, she hesitated, caught off guard by the directness of the accusation. Then something inside her snapped. She stood up slightly, leaning forward into the microphone. "Let me tell you something," she began, her voice firm, but tinged with frustration. "If accountability means holding people responsible for their choices, then I'm all for it. But don't sit there acting like you're some kind of moral authority when your whole platform is built on tearing others down." The crowd erupted. Some cheered loudly, clearly siding with Jasmine, while others booed, throwing their support behind Karoline. The moderator tried to regain control, but the room was ablaze with emotion. People shouted over one another, turning what was supposed to be a civil discussion into a verbal battleground. Security guards hovered nearby, unsure if they needed to intervene. Through it all, Karoline remained eerily calm, jotting down notes as if nothing unusual was happening. Her composure only seemed to infuriate Jasmine further. "You want to talk about accountability?" Jasmine continued, her voice rising above the noise. "Fine. Let's talk about it. How many times have you twisted facts to fit your narrative? How many people have you attacked just to boost your own profile?" Her words hit hard, drawing gasps from parts of the audience. Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she offered a small, almost imperceptible smile before responding. "I'm not here to play games," she said coolly. "I'm here to challenge the status quo. And yes, that includes calling out hypocrisy when I see it." The exchange went on like this for several more minutes, each woman landing blows while dodging counterattacks. Jasmine's passion electrified the room, rallying those who believed in her message. Karoline's precision and poise, on the other hand, won over skeptics who valued logic over emotion. By the time the moderator finally called for a break, both women looked exhausted, but neither showed any signs of backing down. As they retreated to opposite sides of the venue during the intermission, the tension followed them. Reporters swarmed outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of what might happen next. Jasmine moved quickly, her heels clicking against the pavement as she headed toward her car. She wanted nothing more than to escape the suffocating spotlight, even if just for a moment. But fate had other plans. As she reached for her door handle, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "Leaving so soon?" Karoline called out, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Jasmine froze, her hand still gripping the handle. Slowly, she turned around to face her rival. Cameras flashed wildly as reporters scrambled to capture the moment. For a brief second, the two women locked eyes, their expressions unreadable. Then, without warning, Jasmine stepped forward, closing the gap between them. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice tight with irritation. Karoline crossed her arms, her posture relaxed, but her gaze steady. "Just making sure you're sticking around to finish what you started," she replied smoothly. "Wouldn't want anyone accusing you of running away." The comment struck a nerve. Jasmine's jaw tightened, and for a moment it looked like she might lash out physically, but instead she took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. "I'm not running from anything," she shot back. "Unlike you, I actually care about the issues we're discussing." The crowd surrounding them murmured excitedly, hanging on to every word. Someone shouted a question, but neither woman acknowledged it. They were locked in their own private standoff, oblivious to everything else around them. Karoline tilted her head slightly, studying Jasmine with an expression that bordered on amusement. "Careful," she said, her voice low but audible. "Passion is great, but it doesn't mean much without results." "That did it," Jasmine exploded. "Don't lecture me about results," she snapped, her voice loud enough to silence the entire area. "You don't know the first thing about the communities I represent. You don't understand their struggles because you've never lived them." Her words hung heavy in the air, raw and unfiltered. Karoline blinked once, taken aback for the first time since the day began. But true to form, she recovered quickly, offering a faint smile before walking away. Security eventually stepped in, urging the women to separate before things escalated further. Jasmine watched Karoline disappear into the crowd, her chest heaving with emotion. She knew the cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of her breakdown. But in that moment, she didn't care. All she could think about was how unfair it felt, how exhausting it was to constantly defend herself against people who didn't truly understand her mission. Later that evening, as she scrolled through social media, Jasmine saw the fallout unfold in real time. Clips of her confrontation with Karoline dominated timelines, sparking heated debates across platforms. Some praised her honesty and courage, while others criticized her loss of control. Despite the mixed reactions, one thing was undeniable. The showdown had ignited a firestorm, and whether she liked it or not, Jasmine realized this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation felt like a whirlwind. Jasmine sat in her hotel room, replaying the events of the day over and over in her mind. The memory of standing face to face with her rival was burned into her thoughts, as vivid as if it had just happened. She could still hear the clicking of cameras, feel the heat of the spotlight, and see the smirk on Karoline's face when she delivered that final jab. It gnawed at her, not because she cared about what Karoline thought, but because deep down she wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was some truth to the criticism. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the bedside table, lighting up with notifications every few seconds. Social media was ablaze. Supporters were flooding her mentions with messages of encouragement, calling her bold and unapologetic. Memes featuring her fiery responses were already circulating online, turning her passionate outburst into internet gold. But for every supportive comment, there was another mocking her for losing her cool. Critics pounced on the moment, dissecting her words and framing her reaction as evidence of instability or weakness. One viral tweet read, "Passion is great, but leaders need poise under pressure." Did we see that today? Jasmine scrolled through it all, her emotions swinging between pride and frustration. On one hand, she knew she had stood up for what she believed in. She hadn't backed down, even when provoked. That counted for something, right? But on the other hand, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe she'd let her emotions get the better of her. Her team had gathered outside her door, debating whether they should issue a statement addressing the fallout. They knocked lightly, asking if she wanted to talk strategy. For now, though, she needed space. Meanwhile, Karoline was capitalizing on the moment. Back in her own corner of the city, she recorded a polished video for her followers, her tone calm and collected as always. "Today was an important reminder of why accountability matters," she said, looking directly into the camera. "It's easy to make promises and stir emotions, but real change requires action and transparency." She didn't mention Jasmine by name, but everyone knew who she was referring to. The subtle dig was enough to send her supporters into a frenzy, praising her for staying composed while others crumbled under pressure. As the hours passed, the narrative around the showdown began to take shape. News outlets churned out articles analyzing every word exchanged between the two women. Some framed it as a clash of ideologies, progressive passion versus conservative pragmatism. Others painted it as a personal feud, focusing on their contrasting styles and personalities. Late-night comedians jumped on the bandwagon, turning the confrontation into punchlines for their monologues. By morning, it seemed like everyone had an opinion about what had happened, and no one was shy about sharing it. But amidst the noise, Jasmine found herself reflecting on something deeper. This wasn't just about her or Karoline. It was about the larger issues at play: education reform, systemic inequality, accountability and leadership. These weren't abstract concepts. They were real problems affecting real people. And yet here she was, reduced to headlines and hashtags, her message overshadowed by drama. It stung, but it also lit a fire inside her. If people wanted entertainment, fine. But she was determined to use this moment to refocus attention where it belonged, on the communities she fought for. By evening, Jasmine decided to address the situation head-on. Sitting in front of her laptop, she turned on her phone's camera and hit record. "Hey everyone," she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I know today got heated, and I'm sure you've seen the clips by now. Yes, I lost my temper. No, I'm not proud of how things escalated, but I won't apologize for standing up for my values or for calling out hypocrisy when I see it." Her tone softened as she continued. "This isn't about me or anyone else on that stage. It's about the kids sitting in overcrowded classrooms, the families struggling to make ends meet, and the countless lives being impacted by decisions made in rooms like the one we were in today." Her authenticity resonated. Within minutes of posting the video, comments poured in from viewers who appreciated her honesty. Many admitted they initially judged her harshly, but changed their minds after hearing her perspective. "She's human," one commenter wrote, "and sometimes humans lose their cool. At least she's fighting for us." Others praised her for owning her mistakes while doubling down on her principles. The tide of public opinion began to shift ever so slightly in her favor. Karoline, however, wasn't about to let Jasmine have the last word. In a follow-up interview the next day, she doubled down on her earlier points, framing the confrontation as proof that tough questions needed to be asked. "Accountability isn't comfortable," she told the host, "but it's necessary. If someone can't handle being challenged, how can we trust them to lead?" Her confidence never wavered, and her supporters ate it up, praising her for holding firm against criticism. Despite the ongoing back and forth, neither woman showed any signs of backing down. Their rivalry had become a spectacle, drawing attention from across the country. People tuned in not just for the substance of their arguments, but for the sheer drama of it all. Would they meet again? Could they coexist in the same political arena without tearing each other apart? The unanswered questions kept audiences hooked, eagerly awaiting the next chapter in their saga. For Jasmine, the experience was both exhausting and enlightening. She realized that staying true to herself meant embracing imperfection, even when it played out in front of millions. Losing her temper might have been messy, but it was also authentic. And in a world full of carefully curated images and rehearsed sound bites, authenticity mattered more than ever. As she climbed into bed that night, mentally drained but oddly resolved, she reminded herself of one thing. Tomorrow was another day, and the fight was far from over. The days following the explosive confrontation felt like a blur for Jasmine. She woke up each morning to a fresh wave of headlines, opinions, and memes, some supportive, others scathing. It was exhausting, but it also forced her to confront a truth she hadn't fully acknowledged before. Being in the public eye wasn't just about winning arguments or pushing policies. It was about resilience. Every word she said, every move she made was scrutinized under a microscope. And while that reality could feel suffocating, it also gave her an opportunity to show people who she really was, flaws and all. Her team worked tirelessly behind the scenes, strategizing how to pivot from the chaos of the forum into meaningful action. They suggested organizing town halls, drafting op-eds, and scheduling interviews to keep the focus on education reform. But Jasmine knew this moment was bigger than any single issue. This was about trust. People wanted to see authenticity, not just polished speeches. So instead of sticking strictly to their original plan, she decided to take a more personal approach. She started by visiting schools in underserved neighborhoods, the very communities she had been fighting for during the forum. Walking through the hallways of a small elementary school on the outskirts of town, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of purpose. The kids greeted her with wide eyes and shy smiles, curious about the stranger in their midst. Teachers shared stories of overcrowded classrooms, outdated textbooks, and limited resources. One teacher explained how she often bought supplies out of her own pocket because there simply wasn't enough funding. Listening to these struggles firsthand reminded Jasmine why she got into politics in the first place. These weren't abstract problems. They were real lives being impacted every single day. Back at her office later that afternoon, Jasmine sat down to write a heartfelt post about her visit. She included photos of herself interacting with students and teachers, along with a candid reflection on what she'd learned. "This is why I do what I do," she wrote. "Not for the cameras or the debates, but for moments like these. For the chance to make life a little easier for people who deserve so much better." The post went viral almost instantly, striking a chord with readers who appreciated its sincerity. Even some critics softened their tone, acknowledging that maybe they'd been too quick to judge her after the forum. Karoline, meanwhile, continued to dominate the narrative in her own way. She appeared on multiple talk shows, using the platform to reinforce her message of accountability. In one particularly memorable segment, she broke down complex policy issues into simple terms, making them accessible to viewers who might otherwise tune out. Her calm demeanor and sharp intellect won over skeptics, even as her comments about the forum kept fueling debate. "I'm not here to tear anyone down," she insisted during one interview. "I'm here to challenge ideas. And sometimes, challenging ideas means ruffling feathers." Despite their opposing approaches, both women seemed to agree on one thing: the importance of staying visible. For Jasmine, that meant rolling up her sleeves and getting back to grassroots work. She spent hours answering emails from constituents, hosting virtual Q&A sessions, and meeting with community leaders. Her schedule was packed, but she didn't mind. Being out in the field reminded her of the bigger picture and helped silence the lingering doubts that had crept in after the forum. For Karoline, visibility came in the form of media appearances and social media engagement. She posted daily updates, sharing articles, infographics, and videos that aligned with her views. Her followers grew exponentially, many drawn to her ability to articulate complicated topics without oversimplifying them. Yet despite her growing influence, she couldn't escape the shadow of the confrontation. Every time she mentioned accountability or transparency, people immediately thought of Jasmine. And while Karoline never explicitly brought her up, it was clear she relished the role of provocateur. As the weeks passed, the rivalry between the two women became a cultural phenomenon. Late-night comedians joked about their clash, turning it into sketches and parody songs. Podcasters dissected their strategies, debating who won the showdown. Even late-night talk show hosts invited experts to weigh in on whether such heated exchanges were helpful or harmful to political discourse. Some argued that the drama detracted from serious discussions. Others believed it brought attention to important issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. Through it all, Jasmine found herself reflecting on the nature of conflict itself. Was it possible to engage with someone who fundamentally disagreed with you without letting emotions take over? Could passion coexist with poise? These questions swirled in her mind as she prepared for her next big event, a panel discussion on systemic inequality. This time she vowed to stay composed, no matter what curveballs came her way. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that Karoline would somehow find a way to insert herself into the conversation, even if only indirectly. On the morning of the panel, Jasmine arrived early, determined to set the tone. She greeted fellow participants warmly, exchanging pleasantries and reviewing notes together. When the moderator introduced the topic, she spoke with clarity and conviction, avoiding the emotional crescendos that had defined her previous performance. Her words resonated with the audience, earning nods of agreement and thoughtful questions. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she was regaining control of the narrative. But just as things seemed to be going smoothly, a reporter in the crowd raised his hand. "Some have criticized your handling of recent debates," he began, glancing pointedly at Jasmine. "How do you respond to accusations that you let personal attacks overshadow policy discussions?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jasmine paused, taking a deep breath before responding. "I'll admit I'm human," she said finally, her voice steady. "And yes, I've made mistakes, but I refuse to apologize for caring deeply about the issues that matter most. If my passion makes someone comfortable, so be it, because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the people we serve." The room erupted in applause, signaling a shift in momentum. For the first time since the infamous forum, Jasmine felt like she was reclaiming her power, not by silencing her critics, but by rising above them. As she left the venue that evening, Jasmine couldn't help but smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and she knew Karoline would continue to push her limits. But she also knew something else. She was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, with courage, authenticity, and an unwavering commitment to the causes she believed in. The panel discussion on systemic inequality had gone better than Jasmine expected. She walked away from the event feeling lighter, as if a weight she hadn't fully realized was there had been lifted. For the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again, grounded, focused, and ready to tackle whatever came next. But even as she celebrated this small victory, she knew the bigger battle was far from over. Karoline wasn't someone who faded into the background easily, and Jasmine suspected their paths would cross again sooner rather than later. That night, Jasmine sat at her desk, sifting through emails and messages from supporters. Many thanked her for staying true to her values despite the criticism. Others shared personal stories, telling her how her words resonated with their own struggles. One message stood out. A teacher from a rural community wrote about how underfunded schools were affecting her students' futures. "We need leaders who understand what it's like to fight for resources," the email read. "Thank you for not forgetting about us." Reading those words reminded Jasmine why she couldn't afford to let setbacks derail her. Every challenge was an opportunity to grow stronger, both personally and professionally. Still, no matter how much progress she made, the shadow of Karoline loomed large. The commentator continued to dominate headlines, using every platform available to push her agenda. Whether it was dissecting government policies or calling out perceived hypocrisy, Karoline's voice remained steady and unrelenting. Her latest video, posted just hours after Jasmine's panel, tackled the very topic of inequality, but from a vastly different perspective. While Jasmine emphasized compassion and systemic change, Karoline argued for individual responsibility and accountability. Predictably, the comments section erupted into heated debates with viewers divided along ideological lines. Jasmine scrolled through some of the responses, shaking her head at the polarized reactions. It frustrated her that people seemed more interested in picking sides than finding common ground. But frustration quickly gave way to determination. If Karoline wanted to keep the spotlight on their rivalry, fine. Jasmine would use it to amplify the voices of those who often went unheard. She began planning a series of town halls across the state, inviting teachers, parents, and students to share their experiences. Her goal was simple: to put faces and stories behind the statistics and slogans dominating the conversation. Meanwhile, Karoline's strategy took a new turn. Instead of waiting for opportunities to critique Jasmine, she started proactively inserting herself into discussions where Jasmine was likely to appear. When a major news outlet announced a live debate on education reform, Karoline immediately reached out to secure a spot on the panel. Word spread quickly, and soon everyone was speculating whether Jasmine would accept the invitation. Supporters urged her to participate, arguing that avoiding the stage would only play into Karoline's hands. Critics, on the other hand, warned her against engaging further, claiming another confrontation might damage her reputation beyond repair. For Jasmine, the decision wasn't easy. Part of her wanted to step away from the drama and focus on quieter, more impactful work. But another part, the fiery, stubborn part, knew she couldn't shy away from a challenge. This wasn't just about her pride. It was about standing up for the people who relied on her to advocate for them. After consulting with her team, she agreed to join the debate. If she wants to go toe-to-toe again, Jasmine told herself, then let's do it, but this time, I'm coming prepared. Preparation became her mantra in the days leading up to the event. She pored over research papers, attended briefings, and rehearsed answers to potential questions. Her team helped her anticipate Karoline's tactics, strategizing ways to counter her arguments without letting emotions take over. They also encouraged her to lean into her strengths, her ability to connect with people on a human level. You don't have to win every point, one advisor reminded her. Just stay authentic and you'll win hearts. On the day of the debate, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Reporters lined up outside the venue hours before doors opened, eager to capture footage of the two women arriving. Inside, the auditorium filled quickly, with attendees ranging from local activists to national media personalities. Cameras flashed as Jasmine and Karoline entered separately, each greeted by cheers and jeers, depending on which side of the aisle spectators leaned toward. When they finally took their seats on stage, the tension was palpable. Neither woman acknowledged the other directly, but their body language spoke volumes. As the moderator introduced the topic, Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her posture confident yet approachable. Across from her, Karoline sat perfectly still, her expression unreadable. When the floor opened for discussion, Jasmine seized the moment, speaking passionately about the importance of investing in education as a means of breaking cycles of poverty. Her delivery was measured but heartfelt, drawing nods of agreement from parts of the audience. Karoline listened intently, jotting down notes before interjecting with her own perspective. Investment is important, Karoline conceded, her tone neutral. But we also need to ask ourselves, are we holding institutions accountable for results? Or are we simply throwing money at problems without addressing root causes? Her question hung in the air, prompting murmurs of approval from some sections of the crowd. Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully before responding. You're right. We should hold institutions accountable, she said, her voice calm but firm. But accountability starts with understanding the challenges these communities face. You can't fix a problem you refuse to see. The line drew applause, shifting the energy in the room. For the first time, it felt less like a clash of egos and more like a genuine exchange of ideas. Both women traded points respectfully, though sparks occasionally flew when disagreements grew heated. By the end of the debate, neither side could claim a clear victory. But something unexpected happened. Instead of walking away bitter, many attendees expressed admiration for how both women handled themselves. Jasmine's authenticity struck a chord with listeners, while Karoline's precision earned respect, even from skeptics. Social media lit up with praise for the civil tone of the discussion, with some users joking that maybe they'd finally found a way to bridge divides. Backstage afterward, Jasmine exhaled deeply, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. She hadn't won everyone over, and she never would, but she'd stayed true to her values without losing control. As she packed up her things, she glanced toward the hallway where Karoline had disappeared moments earlier. Their rivalry wasn't over and likely never would be. But for now, Jasmine allowed herself a small smile. She'd faced the storm head-on and emerged stronger because of it. The aftermath of the second debate brought a strange kind of calm. For days, Jasmine felt like she was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next wave of criticism or drama to hit. But instead of chaos, there was quiet. People seemed to be processing what they'd seen: two strong, passionate women trading ideas rather than insults. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for Jasmine, that mattered more than anything. She spent the following week focusing on her work, diving into projects that reminded her why she loved public service in the first place. She visited community centers, held listening sessions with local leaders, and even stopped by a food bank to help pack groceries for families in need. These moments grounded her, pulling her away from the noise of politics and back to the heart of the issues she cared about. One afternoon, while chatting with volunteers at the food bank, an elderly woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing up," the woman said softly. "It's not just about policies, it's about knowing someone out there still cares." That simple exchange stayed with Jasmine long after she left the food bank. It reinforced something she'd always believed. Leadership wasn't just about making speeches or winning debates. It was about showing up, listening, and doing the hard, unglamorous work behind the scenes. The viral moments and heated arguments might grab headlines, but real change happened quietly, one conversation and one action at a time. Meanwhile, Karoline continued to dominate the media landscape, though her tone shifted slightly. Instead of leaning heavily into critiques of others, she began framing her arguments around solutions. In interviews, she talked about creating accountability frameworks for government programs and pushing for data-driven decision-making. Her supporters praised her for staying consistent, while critics accused her of softening her stance to appeal to a broader audience. Whatever the case, it was clear that Karoline was evolving, just as Jasmine was. Despite their differences, both women found themselves facing similar challenges. They were constantly under scrutiny, their every move dissected by supporters and opponents alike. Every misstep became fodder for memes. Every success was met with skepticism. Yet neither seemed willing to step back from the spotlight. If anything, the rivalry pushed them to sharpen their skills, refine their messages, and dig deeper into the causes they championed. For Jasmine, this meant doubling down on grassroots efforts. She launched a campaign called Voices Unheard, aimed at elevating stories from marginalized communities. Through town halls, social media campaigns, and partnerships with local organizations, she gave people a platform to share their struggles and hopes for the future. One story in particular stood out: a young mother who worked 2 jobs to support her kids while fighting to keep them in a decent school district. When Jasmine shared the video online, it resonated deeply with viewers, many of whom reached out to say how much it meant to see everyday struggles represented so authentically. Karoline, on the other hand, leaned into her role as a policy analyst. She released a series of detailed reports highlighting inefficiencies in various government programs, complete with recommendations for improvement. While some dismissed her findings as overly technical, others appreciated the clarity and evidence-based approach. Her ability to break down complex issues into digestible points made her a go-to source for journalists covering policy debates. Over time, her influence grew, not just among conservatives but also among moderates looking for practical solutions. As weeks turned into months, the dynamic between the two women began to shift subtly. Their interactions remained professional when they crossed paths at events or on panels, but there was less hostility and more acknowledgement of each other's strengths. During one televised discussion, Jasmine surprised everyone, including herself, by thanking Karoline for raising important questions about accountability. "We may not agree on everything," she added with a small smile. But asking tough questions is how we grow. Karoline nodded, returning the gesture with a rare compliment about Jasmine's dedication to underserved communities. This tentative truce didn't mean the rivalry disappeared entirely. Far from it. Both women continued to challenge each other's ideas, often sparking spirited debates that captivated audiences. But the tone had changed. Gone were the personal jabs and snide remarks. In their place was a mutual respect, or at least an understanding, that they were both fighting for versions of a better future, even if those visions looked vastly different. Behind the scenes, Jasmine reflected on how far she'd come since that first explosive confrontation. She thought about the nights she'd spent doubting herself, wondering if she was cut out for the relentless pressure of public life. Those doubts hadn't vanished completely. They probably never would, but she'd learned to embrace them as part of the journey. Growth wasn't linear, she realized. Sometimes you stumbled, sometimes you soared, and most of the time you simply kept moving forward. One evening, as she sat on her couch scrolling through old photos, Jasmine paused. On a picture taken during her early days in politics, she looked younger then, full of wide-eyed optimism and naive confidence. Back then, she'd imagined changing the world overnight, solving problems with fiery speeches and bold promises. Now, she understood that change was slower, messier, and infinitely more complicated. But it was also richer, more rewarding, because it came from connecting with people, not just talking at them. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from her team, reminding her of an upcoming event where she'd once again share the stage with Karoline. Jasmine sighed, setting the phone aside. She wasn't nervous anymore, not like before. This time, she felt ready. Not because she expected things to go perfectly, but because she knew she could handle whatever came her way. Whether it was applause or criticism, triumph or failure, she'd face it head-on, with courage, authenticity, and a deep commitment to the people counting on her. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had shaped her, for the people who inspired her daily, and for the lessons she'd learned along the way. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, its own uncertainties. But tonight, she rested easy, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. The day of the event arrived, and Jasmine woke up with a sense of purpose. She wasn't nervous anymore, just focused. After months of navigating heated debates, public scrutiny, and personal growth, she felt like she had finally found her footing. This wasn't about proving herself to Karoline or anyone else. It was about continuing the work that mattered most. Still, she knew this appearance would draw attention, and she wanted to make sure her message came through loud and clear. She spent the morning going over notes, rehearsing key points, and reminding herself to stay grounded. Her team offered words of encouragement, telling her how proud they were of how far she'd come. "You're not the same person you were back then," one of them said as they adjusted her mic before heading out. "And people can see that." Jasmine smiled, appreciating the sentiment. She didn't need validation from others, but it was nice to know her efforts hadn't gone unnoticed. When she arrived at the venue, the energy in the room was electric. People filled every seat, some holding signs supporting their favorite causes, others clutching notebooks ready to jot down insights. Reporters lined the edges of the stage, cameras rolling as both women took their places under the bright lights. For once, there was no tension between them, just a quiet acknowledgement that this moment mattered beyond their rivalry. The moderator opened the discussion by asking each woman to share what inspired them to pursue public service. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice warm and genuine. "I grew up seeing families struggle, wondering why things had to be so hard when solutions seemed possible. That's what drives me, knowing I have a chance to help create a world where fewer people feel left behind." The crowd responded with applause, moved by her sincerity. Karoline followed, her tone measured but equally compelling. "For me, it's about accountability. Too often promises are made without follow-through. I want to ensure we hold ourselves and our leaders to higher standards." While their approaches differed, it was clear both women shared a desire to make a difference, even if their methods clashed. As the conversation unfolded, the discussion shifted toward practical steps for addressing systemic issues. Jasmine spoke passionately about investing in education, healthcare, and affordable housing, emphasizing the importance of meeting people where they were. Karoline countered with ideas centered on efficiency and measurable outcomes, pushing for reforms that prioritized long-term sustainability. Their exchanges weren't heated this time. They were thoughtful, respectful, and occasionally punctuated by moments of agreement. At one point, the moderator posed a question about collaboration. "Do you think it's possible to find common ground despite your differences?" he asked, glancing between the two women. Jasmine hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Absolutely. We may never see eye to eye on everything, but progress doesn't require unanimity. It requires effort. And if we focus on shared goals rather than divisions, we can move forward together." Karoline echoed the sentiment, adding, "We don't have to agree on every detail to recognize that certain principles, like transparency and accountability, are universal. If we start there, maybe we can build bridges instead of walls." The full audience erupted into applause, clearly moved by the shift in tone. Gone were the biting remarks and defensive postures. Instead, there was a sense of hope, a glimpse of what could happen when people chose dialogue over discord. Social media buzzed with reactions, many praising the civil nature of the exchange. One tweet summed it up perfectly. "This is what leadership looks like: listening, learning, and finding ways to work together." After the event ended, Jasmine lingered backstage, taking a moment to process everything. She felt lighter, as though a weight she hadn't fully realized was there had lifted. A reporter approached her for a quick comment, asking how she planned to keep the momentum going. Jasmine thought for a second before answering. "By staying true to myself and remembering why I started this journey. Change takes time, patience, and persistence. But if we keep showing up for the tough conversations, the uncomfortable truths, and the everyday struggles, we'll get there." Later that evening, as she sat alone in her hotel room, Jasmine reflected on the road ahead. She knew challenges would still arise, not just from opponents like Karoline, but also from within herself. Doubts would creep in, setbacks would test her resolve, and moments of frustration would threaten to derail her progress. But she also knew something else. She was stronger now. Stronger because she'd faced her fears, embraced her imperfections, and refused to let criticism define her. Her phone buzzed with messages from supporters thanking her for inspiring them to believe in the possibility of change. One stood out. A young girl who wrote, "I want to be like you when I grow up. You make me think I can do anything." Jasmine stared at the screen, tears welling up in her eyes. It wasn't the accolades or the recognition that mattered. It was knowing that her journey might inspire someone else to take their own first step. As she drifted off to sleep that night, Jasmine allowed herself to dream, not just about policies or platforms, but about the kind of world she hoped to leave behind. A world where passion and pragmatism coexisted, where people listened as much as they spoke, and where collaboration outweighed conflict. She didn't know if she'd live to see it fully realized, but she believed wholeheartedly that every small action brought humanity closer to that vision. The next morning, Jasmine woke up early, ready to tackle whatever lay ahead. Whether it was another debate, another community visit, or simply another day of doing the work that needed to be done, she approached it with renewed determination. The rivalry with Karoline had taught her valuable lessons, not just about resilience but also about humility, empathy, and the power of connection. And so, Jasmine stepped into the new day, carrying with her not just the scars of past battles, but also the strength they had given her. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it. One challenge, one conversation, and one heartbeat at a time.